We all have at some point heard the stories of the witch trials, whether or not they took place in Salem, Massachusetts, in Scotland, UK, or in Northern Europe. We hear about it as a group of women who were persecuted. This week's book is all about one of them from a fictitious perspective. Hey everyone, welcome to Recently Read. This week I am talking about the book Weyward by Emilia Hart. This book I picked up a couple of weeks ago, actually after I got The Sirens. The Sirens is actually her second book and Weyward was her first. So I have yet to read Sirens, but I was really interested in the premise of Weyward as I'm diving in a little bit more into the idea of the medieval witch. I have several books on the topic that I have been reading for the last couple of years. Kind of want to do maybe a personal curriculum at some point, but this book was intriguing as it was running the parallels between what I was reading in a nonfiction perspective and then melting that into a fictitious book. This book talks about or chronicles three women in the same family. So it starts off with Altha, who is the So this book chronicles three women of the same family. The first one is Altha, and the years that it sort of chronicles is around 1619. So she is accused of witchcraft during a trial, and we get a little behind the scenes of that storyline. And then we bolt forward into the 1940s with Violet. And then the modern day character is in 2019, and her name is Kate. Again, all three of these women are in the same family, in the same bloodline. So it is really interesting I always love books that that kind of follow a modern character learning about her ancestry. I think that ancestry is really, really interesting. And I've always been fascinated with my family tree and where I've come from and where my ancestors have come from as well. So this book sort of tapped into, again, finding that different time period as well as following the ancestors of the main character of Kate. This book, or this review, of course, I won't spoil anything for you, but it was very, very, I want to say gripping, but not gripping as in like, oh, I was, on the edge of my seat the entire time, but it definitely kept my attention. It was a very, very quick read, and I loved every moment of it. One of the things, again, I talked about reading about witches from a nonfiction perspective and then switching over to the fiction perspective here. This book really does reclaim the label of witch, right? So we think about witch as this scary person that we sort of put away from society, that we've shunned from society because they are the abnormal. And really, if we think about that, it's the non-conforming woman. And we as a society, or we as women in contemporary society, have really been told to be non-conforming, to be unique, that we are special. And so witch in this way, again, in the way of the book, was really this label for the woman who was non-conforming. So in a way, maybe we're all witches these days, but it really did shine a light on the historical fear of women and of women's autonomy, that they could take care of themselves, that they were strong enough to do hard things. It also dives into, there's kind of three different areas, right? So we have the reclaiming of the label of witch. And then there is the area of women and the natural world. I think this book does a really good job of giving the discussion of the need for us nowadays, again, in contemporary society, to reconnect with the natural world, to get reacquainted with our food, where it comes from, with our herbs, where they come from, what they are. Do we even know what parsley is? Do we even know, like, besides a garnish, what parsley can actually do? What are the benefits of parsley? We don't know that. We're not taught that. Nothing's handed down from generation to generation. So it was, again, very interesting to hear about the recipes that their ancestors were making for medicine. Obviously, now we do have Western medicine. We do have advances in that area. So we don't necessarily need the parsley if it is medicinal, but it is really nice to know again, or to reacquaint ourselves with this knowledge. The third part really focuses on, or the third theme of this book really focuses on the last character, or the main character, the contemporary character of Kate. And this theme was intergenerational trauma and healing. I think that we have, over the last maybe decade, really talked about the idea of trauma and intergenerational trauma, and how the cycles of trauma will just continue to cycle through unless one of us is responsible enough and does the hard thing and breaks those cycles. So this book, again, does a really good job at touching upon all three of these themes, really weaving them together seamlessly into this great, fast-paced story. The characters themselves, I think Altha really does embody this idea of historical persecution. The idea that a man, if he was, disgruntled by you, or if you did something to just slight him, he could ruin you. He could actually kill you without being accused of murder. He could accuse you of being a witch. And all of the ordeals that women had to go through in order to prove that they weren't a witch were actually set up to prove that they were a witch. So it's absolutely ridiculous if you think about the laws of nature and the laws of physics, and everything that we do now know is real. We know that up is up and down is down. But the idea of, a man being able to have that much power over a woman is scary, right? We are going through maybe a second time, maybe a third time, maybe a fourth wave of this reintroduction of male power over females. But in this book, Altha, the 1619 character, really does embody that historical persecution of women. Violet, who, if we fast forward, this was the character from the 1940s, and who actually is, I believe, the grandmother of the later character of Kate, of the 2019 character. So there is, again, a little bit of a closer relationship between Violet and Kate versus Violet and Altha versus Kate and Altha themselves. But Violet, again, the 1940s, is really the character who is internalizing all of this oppression, right? All of this historical oppression. And then she has this awakening moment. She has this sort of coming of age, or coming into oneself moment. And there's this slow arc of rebellion that takes her away from her family, where she really is responsible for herself. And I think that there are a lot of opportunities that we miss out on in modern day, of the opportunities of separating ourselves with comfort, separating ourselves with the everyday, with what is knowable, so that we can then grow. We can do hard things. We can experience something that is different than what we are used to. And I think that Violet really does embody that. And then we have Kate. Again, this is the 2019 character. She comes from the perspective of she's in a relationship that is really controlling, and she has this journey from fear to autonomy. She breaks away from that relationship, and she has this what now moment. And I think near the end of the book, she really does have her shining moment. I want to not give away too many spoilers here, but there is a really good ending for Kate there. I think what this book does really well is the atmosphere, is the sense of place. There's the main setting is this cottage out in the middle of nowhere, but it's not quite nowhere because it's near a castle. But it has this gravitas, this feeling of age, of robustness, of history, but also this lightness of it's away from the pressures of society. It's away from the darkness of the main character's family and what she's going through with an abusive relationship. So there is this lightness, but there is also, again, this foundation, this like soft landing place for all three of the women in this book. And of course, there's this emotional resonance across the timelines. There is, obviously, everybody has emotions. These women have emotions, but the emotions are the same, right? You really see the universalness of all of our emotions. We think that we're the first one to think that we're sad, or we're the first one to think that we're anxious, but our ancestors had the same feelings. They are humans. We're all humans. We're having this human experience. I really loved this book, mainly because there is an ongoing discussion about women's roles in society, a feminist perspective, different waves of feminism, and how they are affecting how we think about ourselves in society in a different way every single time that a wave of feminism hits. And so again, this book, because it chronicles three different women, sort of touches upon like that different wave, that slightly different perspective on feminism, on women's autonomy over their bodies, over their lives, over their choices. And how that just slightly changes with every era that the book touches upon, but every era that we have a different sort of social awakening into these moments of realization. The stories themselves, they sort of are about reclaiming the character's identity. Because the story is woven out, you don't necessarily have like all of Altha's story here, and then all of Violet's, and then all of Kate's. But you really do start to see this, again, this almost like this braiding of their stories together. But each one of them has a moment where they reclaim their identity. They realize that somebody has taken power over their choices, over their body, over the direction of their life. And they have a moment where they decide they don't care what the consequences are, but they are going to have their own choice, or they're going to make their own choices. They're going to do what they want to do, come hell or high water. Again, doesn't matter what actually are the consequences of those choices, but they come to this realization that the choices are their own, and they are allowed to make them. So I really enjoyed that perspective on this book. Again, I really love books that go back in time and shift our perspectives of how we see a character, or how we see a certain element of our own lives through the lens of a character in medieval era. Whether or not that is in New England, or whether or not it is in Northern Europe or in the UK itself. But you're able to really see the perspective from that person's eyes. But it's the same problem, right? They're having the same problems we are today. And, maybe being able to see their perspective changes our perspective, or changes how we approach something that we might think is a problem. For the audience of this book, who do I think should read it? First off, the recommendation, I would recommend this as a suggested read, mainly because I don't think that this is a book for everyone. I do think that this is a book for women who are interested in their place in society, who are wrestling with the idea of being able to speak out and being able to speak up. I think that it's a really hard thing, maybe even harder now, because we have these things called cancel culture, and we're too scared to say what we want to say because it might go against the norm, or it might go against the wave of popularity. So I think that this book is, again, it's a perspective of fiction. So it's not necessarily a how-to guide per se, but I think it does give you a little bit of a push to say, I'm going to say this, I'm going to feel this, I'm going to be this, regardless of what the consequences are, because this is my life. It is not anybody else's life, and I get to choose what is right for me. I didn't necessarily think going into this book that I would have those perspectives. I thought that it would just be a fun read. And again, it is a very quick read. I think I read it in like 3 days. I thought I would just have the perspectives of, oh, well, this is an experience of witchcraft, or an experience of a woman with witchcraft, or along those lines. But it was a lot deeper than that. I did, like I said, I bought Sirens before I bought Weyward. So I am looking forward to diving into this book too. And this is another book that chronicles 3 different women through 3 different time periods. So 2019, 1999, and 1800. So looking forward to diving into this book. But in the meantime, suggested read, Weyward by Emilia Hart. If you made it this far, make sure to hit that subscribe button so that you are notified of any upcoming episodes. It's free for you, but it means the world to us.